At 10, Donald Trump says the war with Iran was the last best chance to stop the country's regime as the U.S. military confirms 6 service members have now been killed. Today, the United States military continues to carry out large-scale combat operations in Iran to eliminate the grave threats posed to America by this terrible terrorist regime. There are more strikes hitting Iran right now. Israeli-U.S. attacks continue into a third day with the Iranian Red Crescent saying at least 550 people have been killed. Iranian missiles hit Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and targets here in Israel as the war escalates across the Middle East. Strikes closed the world's biggest oil and gas facilities in some Gulf states, sending prices soaring. 3 American jets are shot down by friendly fire in Kuwait, while Keir Starmer says British involvement in the war will be for defensive operations only. This government does not believe in regime change from the skies. The Prime Minister explicit there about his view, the government's view, and explicit too about his disagreement with President Trump. And tonight, some of the 300,000 Brits in the region have returned home. We heard explosions, we heard the hotel shake, we could see columns of black smoke, we saw drone interceptions. As a third day of war draws to a close, we'll be reporting from across the region from Dubai, Doha, Beirut, Cyprus, the Iranian border, and we'll hear directly from Iranians about what they want to happen next. On BBC London, we hear from Londoners with links to Iran on the widening conflict in the Middle East. Difficulty contacting friends and family is causing widespread uncertainty. Hello to you. We're live in Tel Aviv as Donald Trump reiterates the war with Iran is designed to eliminate the threat from a terrorist regime and going to war was the last best chance to stop Iran posing a threat to America. In the last hour, the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio went further, saying Washington anticipated a strike on Iran from Israel and so launched a preemptive campaign to prevent reprisals against America. It comes as the U.S. and Israel continued military strikes for a third day with the Iranian Red Crescent saying more than 550 people have now been killed. Well, there's been a significant escalation of the conflict with Iran staging retaliatory strikes right across the Middle East following the killing of its supreme leader Ayatollah Khamenei. While the U.S. and Israel have continued their attacks on Iranian targets, including in Thran, with many huge explosions reported there today. Lebanon has been drawn into the conflict with the health ministry there saying at least 52 people have been killed in Israeli strikes. Israel says it was simply responding to attacks by the Iran-backed militant group Hezbollah. And Iran has continued to hit back at states and bases allied to the U.S. across the Middle East. In Cyprus, 2 drones heading for RAF Akrotiri were intercepted following a drone attack last night. Iran has also targeted energy sites, including this oil refinery in Saudi Arabia and a major gas plant in Qatar. Global oil and gas prices have now risen sharply. And in Kuwait, 3 U.S. fighter jets crashed after being mistakenly shot down by friendly fire. All 6 crew ejected safely. Well, Jeremy Bowen, our international editor, has our first report tonight on day 3 of the war. 6 missiles struck Sanad in Iran's Kurdistan province. Official Arabian media said densely populated neighborhoods were hit. The Americans filmed their destruction of a missile launcher. They say they're working through a list of military targets. This is a satellite image of an Iranian naval vessel on fire inside the seawall in the port of Bandar Abbas. But Iranian civilians are also in the firing line. Overnight in Thran, children were among those treated after the Gandhi hospital was badly damaged. The hospital is out of use. Israel's prime minister said they're targeting tyrants in Thran to protect civilians, but war is never as clean or simple as a soundbite. In Kuwait, 3 American F-15 warplanes were shot down. The Americans said mistakenly by friendly fire from the Kuwaitis. Their crews ejected safely. And in Washington, Donald Trump is back at the White House from Florida. He believes this war of choice was an opportunity not to be missed. This was our last best chance to strike what we're doing right now and eliminate the intolerable threats posed by this sick and sinister regime. And they are indeed sick and sinister. Our objectives are clear. First, we're destroying Iran's missile capabilities. And you see that happening on an hourly basis and their capacity to produce brand new ones and pretty good ones they make. Second, we're annihilating their navy. We've knocked out already 10 ships. They're at the bottom of the sea. Third, we're ensuring that the world's #1 sponsor of terror can never obtain a nuclear weapon. The war is spreading across the Middle East. The Saudis' biggest oil refinery, Ras Tanura, was shut down by an Iranian attack. Iran is targeting Arab oil states across the Gulf, trying to disrupt and outflank America's power, hoping the Saudis and others will put pressure on Donald Trump to end the war. But making Gulf Arab states who did not want the war into targets, this was Dubai, looks to be a bad mistake for Iran, pushing them closer to the US and Israel. The Israelis attacked Beirut after Iran's Lebanese ally, Hezbollah, fired into Israel's north. Hezbollah was considered to be one of Iran's main weapons against Israel until the Israelis killed its leaders and destroyed much of its missile stockpile in the Gaza war. Israel is now threatening a new offensive in Lebanon. It feels as if Israel and the US see an opportunity to take care of unfinished business in the region. It's coming at a cost for the Israelis, with funerals in Bedshi near Jerusalem of civilians killed by an Iranian missile. Israel's air defense system is strong but not infallible. It has a finite supply of interceptors. Iran is calibrating its attacks to try to force Israel to burn through its defenses. In Bedshi, Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister, restated his war aims. If this regime, this terrorist regime of the kind we've never seen in the world, if they get nuclear weapons and the means to deliver them, ballistic missiles, intercontinental ballistic missiles, they will threaten all of humanity. In Thran tonight, the regime's loyalists are back on the streets. They've built an important core of support. Over the weekend, they filled the main square in the city of Isfahan. An internet blackout makes it hard to gauge the mood in Iran, but BBC Persian has been able to contact Iranians who want the fall of the regime. Bakeries and petrol stations are busy. The streets are not busy. The main concern here is that the US might do a deal and the authorities begin oppressing people all over again. I think the Revolutionary Guard still has power on the ground, and this is what makes people afraid. People feel anxious and elated all at once. With every explosion, some shout with joy from their windows. There are many security stations around the city, stopping people that they deem suspicious. We are tired, very tired. The death of Khamenei is not enough. They all need to go. It is only day 3 of the war. This has a long way to go. A deepening debate about the legality of America and Israel's decision to go to war. Probably weeks of airstrikes and without doubt years of consequences. Jeremy Bowen, BBC News. An overview thereof the main developments today from Jeremy. Well, in the last hour, it's been confirmed that 6 U.S. service personnel have now been killed in action. Earlier, Donald Trump said he attacked Iran because it was the last best chance to strike and to eliminate the intolerable threats posed by this sick and sinister regime. Well, Sarah Smith is live outside the White House for us now. Sarah? Yeah, Donald Trump was in sunny Florida when he launched this attack on Iran, but he's now back here in a snowy White House where he appeared live on television talking about the war for the first time. But he didn't take questions from any of the reporters like me who were in the room with him. Donald Trump was awarding medals to the heroes of previous American wars as he made his case for why today's serving military are risking their lives again. The regime already had missiles capable of hitting Europe and our bases both local and overseas, and would soon have had missiles capable of reaching our beautiful America. The purpose of this fast-growing missile program was to shield their nuclear weapon development. Donald Trump always railed against the war in Iraq and other previous American attempts to effect regime change. He promised voters no new foreign wars. The Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth served in Iraq. He says this conflict is different from that invasion in 2003. No stupid rules of engagement, no nation-building quagmire, no democracy-building exercise, no politically correct wars. We fight to win and we don't waste time. This is not a so-called regime change war. But the regime sure did change, and the world is better off for it. When 3 U.S. fighter jets were down by friendly fire in Kuwait, no Americans died. The pilots ejected safely, but 6 military personnel have been killed already, 18 seriously wounded. It's news like this that makes formerly loyal Trump supporters cry betrayal. Ex-Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene reposted pictures of what Iran said was the strike that hit a school building and said, "I did not vote for this in elections or Congress. This is not what we thought MAGA was supposed to be." Shame. President Trump did not ask Congress for a vote to authorize military action before launching this attack. And Democrats say they have not heard a convincing reason for attacking Iran. Well, the real reason for this operation, please stand up, because it is changing by the hour, right? It's regime change one moment. It's some undefined imminent threat, which by the way is a lie, right? There is no imminent threat. The Secretary of State came to Congress to explain the need for this attack. Despite Iran being years away from developing a nuclear weapon, the objectives of this operation are to destroy their ballistic missile capability and make sure they can't rebuild it, and make sure that they can't hide behind that to have a nuclear program. That's the objective of the mission. That said, abundantly clear, we would love for there to be an Iran that's not governed by radical Shia clerics. Donald Trump is already facing opposition to this war at home from both the left and the right. Opposition that may grow as American casualties inevitably increase. Sarah, there do seem to be shifting ration for this war coming from American officials: regime change, fears over reprisals after an Israeli attack, imminent threats, nuclear weapons ambitions, and so on. I suppose all that could be true at the same time, but are the American people a little confused? Yeah, I think they have every right to be, because they hear different things from different people at different times. When Donald Trump was speaking here earlier today, he did not repeat his call for the Iranian people to rise up and overthrow their government, which he had asked them to do at the weekend. But then we heard from Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, who was basically saying regime change is not the objective of this conflict, but it would be a very welcome development if it happened. And the other big question is, we know Iran does not have a nuclear weapon and was not on the brink of developing one, not least because the US bombed their nuclear sites just 9 months ago. So why was this attack necessary now? Well, what we've been hearing from administration officials today is that it was necessary to take out Iran's ballistic conventional weapons, because if and when it did develop a nuclear weapon, it would use those conventional weapons to defend it. And we've also heard from a couple of people today, the biggest wave of attacks of this war has not even begun yet. Alright, Sarah, thank you. Sarah Smith, our North America editor there, live outside the White House. Well, it's understood RAF Fairford in Gloucestershire and the military base at Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean will be used by the Americans for defensive strikes on Iranian missile sites. Meanwhile, sirens have been sounding at RAF Akitari in Cyprus, warning of a potential attack. The British base there has already been targeted by Iran. One drone hit the runway. Security has been boosted with additional fighter jets, but families on the base have been told to leave. Jessica Parker has just arrived in Lanika in Cyprus for us and can speak to us now. Jessica, I suppose these are particularly anxious times for the folks on the base. Absolutely. It's been a pretty dramatic 48 hours here in Cyprus. So today we heard from the Croat government that 2 drones have been intercepted that they say were heading towards the base RAF at Kriteri, and that's after, as you mentioned, a drone actually struck the base on Sunday night. There were no casualties, we're told, and the damage was limited. But where did that drone come from? Well, there are unconfirmed reports that the Iranian-backed Hezbollah group in Lebanon may have been behind the launch, but that has not been confirmed. What has been confirmed by UK officials is that they say that first drone was launched before UK Prime Minister Karma said the US could use a basis for what he's described as limited and defensive measures in order to strike Iranian missile sites. In the House of Commons, the British Prime Minister also said that Cyprus bases here in Cyprus were not being used by US bombers. The Croat government itself very keen to stress that it isn't involved in the wider conflict, and for the people of Cyprus, of course, an anxious wait to see if the situation escalates. Thank you Jess Parker, who's just arrived on Cyprus for us. Thank you. Wells Tarama says the government doesn't believe in regime change from the skies and said his decision not to get involved in the initial strikes on Iran was in Britain's national interest. That is what I've done and I stand by it, he said. Well, his statement in the comments came after Donald Trump said he was very disappointed in the Prime Minister for taking too long to accept a U.S. request to use British military bases for defensive strikes on Iranian missile sites. Well, Chris Mason is at Westminster for us tonight. Chris Clive, the Prime Minister, today explicitly and directly set out his view on this conflict after a couple of days in which his ministers were really struggling to cogently articulate what they made of America and Israel's actions and why. Let me play you around half a dozen contributions to the debate in the House of Commons this afternoon. It lasted for around 2.5 hours. We'll start with the Prime Minister. This government does not believe in regime change from the skies, and I thank him for his question. The lessons of history have taught us that it is important when we make decisions like this that we establish there is a lawful basis for what the United Kingdom is doing. That is one of the lessons from Iraq, and that there's a viable thought-through plan. They're the principles I apply to the decision not to get involved in the offensive strikes of the US and Israel. They're also the principles I applied separately to the separate decision and a separate request from the US to be able to take defensive action. On Saturday, our allies in Canada and Australia immediately backed the action taken by America against this despotic regime in Thran. And I have made it very clear that the Conservative Party also stands behind America taking this necessary action against state-sponsored terror. Does he not understand that after 10 years of negotiation that have failed, actually the West was left with no alternative? And does he understand also that actually in refusing to support the US he has humiliated us on the international stage? We have seen before what happens when an American president launches an illegal war with no idea how or when it is going to end. And we fear for what comes next. We also condemn the deeply irresponsible and illegal attack by the US and Israel on Iran launched in the middle of nuclear negotiations. The best tribute to the murderers in Thran and the Iranian regime is a maintenance of an international rules-based system. And more than that, we owe it to the people across the region to learn from the instability that we had in the aftermath of Iraq. The question for today that people want us to ask is, when will people be coming home, especially from Doha and Dubai? Prime Minister said there are around 300,000 Britons in the region, and the Foreign Office is working hard to bring people home as quickly and safely as we can. He said there is a YouGov poll out tonight which gives us some sense of public opinion on the events of the last few days. The poll suggesting that far more people in Britain oppose America's actions than support them, and far more oppose allowing the US to use UK airbases than support that. All of this on the day where perhaps we've seen the biggest public disagreement yet between the Prime Minister and President Trump. Chris, thank you. Chris Mason, our political editor there, live at Westminster. Well, our correspondents across the region have all the latest developments. Where Davis is in Beirut is standing by in northern Iraq, and Barbara Plet-Usha is in the Qatari capital Doha. We're going to start with you first in the Lebanese capital, which is now a new front in this war. Yeah, Clive. Well, this is exactly what the Lebanese government and most people here didn't want to get involved in another costly, divisive conflict with Israel. But the key thing here is Hezbollah. Hezbollah, of course, was a key ally of the Islamic regime in Iran. And when that was attacked, Hezbollah, which is still quite powerfully independent here, decided it was going to attack Israel with some missiles overnight. Israel's response to that was overwhelming, attacking Hezbollah positions here in the capital in Beirut and in the south of the country. There were explosions all day long intermittently, drones overhead, and 52 people were killed in those strikes. And I think Israel has decided that it can't trust the Lebanese government to deal with Hezbollah. So, the Israelis have said tonight that they're going to carry on targeting specific Hezbollah figures and installations until they're happy that Hezbollah has been defeated. And to that end, tonight, there's been a warning to more than 30 towns and villages in southern Lebanon to be evacuated because that Israeli military operation is ongoing. And Ola, you're in Ariel. US troops are stationed